Are you building a business, feeling the stress of all the pressures on you, and hungry to learn from other entrepreneurs? Then you're in the right place. You're listening to But First Principles, where we highlight the principles you need to win both at work and at life. Let's dive in. All right, I'm joined today by Duke Dodson, and it's really cool. We chat a little bit. You were just telling me you grew up an entrepreneur, so can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. One of my first exposures to running a small business was my mom. So my mom was a teacher, and when she had my sister, who's 8 years younger than me, she was staying home at first, and she wanted to start doing something to earn, but she had needed to be home a lot. This is pre-internet, but she started a gift basket delivery business. So like she started by like targeting realtors and people like that, and whenever a realtor would sell a house, she'd have a pre-made basket. And at first, it was really small. I'd be going with her to like the dollar store to help pick out some items to go in it. But I saw the whole kind of process of her selling, creating our marketing materials, like little paper brochures and
Right.
logos, selling to people. And then once an order would come in, I would see her put the baskets together, pack. A lot of times we were packaging and shipping. So it started off in one of the rooms in our house, and it kept growing. Next thing you know, it took over 3 rooms of our house, and we had people like she had employees that worked in our house, packing these
Nice.
baskets and whatever. It eventually got too big for the house, and she decided to sell it. So after like I want to say 3 or 4 years, she sold it, and it wasn't a big exit, but I got to see like how hard an entrepreneur has to work. It was around the clock. We would
Yeah.
she was working all day. I come home from school, I'd help her a little bit, and then we'd have dinner, and then she was back downstairs. It was like the old playroom and the laundry room and an old bedroom of our house that got completely taken over. So that was kind of cool.
You also
You
saw the
know,
whole life cycle of a business. I mean, like from start to exit.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I can say it now. She probably didn't care, but she sold the business for $30,000, which today wouldn't sound like very much. But when you're a middle class person, and my parents without that exit probably had $1,500 in their checking account. You know what I mean? So like the
Right. Yeah, totally.
$30,000 was a lot. It got my attention. I guess I would say that you could build something and then sell it. I got to see the good side of that. And we were talking earlier, talked about my uncle who was a dairy farmer in Franklin County, Virginia, and he ran a very successful farm. So successful that he bought a second farm and a third farm in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I remember I went with him to see the new farm, and I could see like the pride and like the excitement of growth and expansion. But
Mm.
then market conditions changed, and it was very difficult to um, sell milk on the East Coast, and all the milk production was out west. And
Yeah.
I remember him always like at like holidays, like he was always cursing the government and banks, and I was too young to really understand what all that was about. But then he actually went bankrupt. Like he lost all 3 farms, including the first farm was where he lived. That was his house, so he lost his house. And so I got to see the downside and the risk, and that certainly scared the heck out of my mom. My mom has never started a business since then because that was her brother. And so I got to see that part as well. And I've had a few other folks in my family that are entrepreneurs, and I was always picking their brain about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think they all did a great. I have a great uncle who's still alive. He's almost 90, but he built a greenhouse in his backyard in Franklin County, and then he built a second and a third, and finally he got to like I want to say 14 greenhouses in his backyard, and he'll die a multimillionaire, and you would never know it. Drives an old beat up truck, simple man, farm,
Yeah.
farm type,
Yeah.
and but he
What
worked his butt off.
what did he sell? What were the greenhouses selling?
A lot of flowers and stuff like that. So like I remember like he was, Franklin County was 45 minutes from where I grew up, but like he grew up pretty big where he was like selling what are those red flowers that they always sell to schools? Like starts with a P. I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm not
I'll,
a big flowers guy, so
I'll think of it in a second, but
yeah. I'm
like
thinking mums or something because like my son's preschool just sold mums, but that's
yeah. So yeah, he grew a lot of stuff to be honest with you, but I think flowers, like stuff like that, was like the main part of his business. But him and his wife, I mean, they had a staff as well, but him and his wife would work 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day.
yeah.
Like, I mean, they grinded, but he loved it. I don't think he would trade it, for anything. He is a man who wanted to control his own destiny, and he did.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I shared, and folks who listen to this podcast will know that my dad went bankrupt as well, so I saw that, and
Yeah.
and he rebuilt. Um, and I'd be curious to know if it's your uncle, right, who went bankrupt.
Yeah.
What did he end up doing? Was there kind of like a silver lining, or was there any happy ending to it where
Yeah, so I think he was certainly humbled by the experience. I think, and but he's a hardworking dude, and he didn't let much grass grow under his feet. Him and my other uncle, they ended up moving to Eden, North Carolina, and they built a drive-through gas station,
okay,
um,
okay,
like picture like a brew through kind of, but this was in Eden, North Carolina, and
okay,
it was pretty successful. And then a dude came along and wanted to buy it, so they sold it. He
okay.
ended up
Well, so even for him, like there was sort of an entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah,
Um,
and now he operates a very small farming business. Now he grows like tomatoes and
okay,
pumpkins and all kinds of stuff, and that's what him and his wife do that. And so, not many of the folks in that my mom's side of the family have had jobs, right? They've kind of worked for themselves and kind of figured it out.
sure. So it's kind of in your blood, and you were saying, again when we were talking earlier that um, you started your own business in high school too. So it's something you've been doing
Yeah,
forever.
yeah. I was joking earlier that I'm like the classic like lemonade stand kid, right? Like I was always trying to figure out a way to create a business, like even as a kid. And I remember my dad. I was telling you earlier, my dad was a State Farm agent, and he technically was an employee of State Farm, but he ran his own office. And early on, he explained to me, there's a lot of ways you can make money. You can work for it, and you can have your money make money for you. Or you can have let people make money for you.
Hmm.
And he always explained to me like if you work for someone else is going to dictate your salary, and you may be good and you may earn a high salary. And he didn't persuade me not to go be an employee somewhere. Like if I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, he would have supported that and pushed that. But he said if you want to control how much money you make and you don't want it to be someone else's call, then you either have to be in sales or you have to start your own business.
Yeah, that's an awesome training. I mean, like most
Yeah,
people don't really understand how that works. Like, really,
yeah.
so it's
You
great.
only know what you know, right? You only know what you're
Yeah,
exposed to. And I was lucky that those folks, my mom, my dad, my stepmom, my stepdad, all these folks, gave me really great advice over the years. And ultimately, they would have supported whatever I did. But there wasn't. It didn't take long for me to figure out that's what I wanted to do. So I had lemonade stands as a kid. None of them were successful. Like you learned very quickly. Like, oh crap, I could sell 60 cups of lemonade, but it still doesn't cover all the startup costs of buying the materials and equipment and all that, right?
cost of
But
goods
then, like
sold.
when I was 18, or I was 17, I think me and my best friend started a car detailing business, and we ran it in the summers when I was in high school, and that was fun. We didn't make much. We made like enough money, but it would not. It's not like we killed it. But I did the math one day. We detailed a car. Got $110 to split, so it's $55. Took us a couple hours, and I did the math. My buddies that were working at Outback Steakhouse were making like $5 an hour, and I think we made something like $20 an hour each or something like that.
Yeah,
And so that light bulbs are going off at that point as well.
just the math of it. Like, wow,
Yeah,
this is like four times more or whatever it was, right? Um,
yeah,
okay, so fast forward today, like, can you kind of give us a sense of like, because you're running a couple different businesses and Dodson Properties and if I got that right, the name. Um,
yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about like what that's all about and a little bit of the history of that?
Sure. So when I was 27, I started my first like adult business, I would say, and I started a company called Dodson Property Management here in Richmond. And day one, all we did was manage single family homes for other people, right? So if you own one rental property or maybe you own 10 rental properties, we would manage those properties for you. That started off as a need. I had bought my first rental property. I was looking for a property manager in Richmond to manage it. Couldn't find one that I liked, and I thought, hey, this is something that there's a need for it. No one's doing it the way I want it done in Richmond, and something I think I could be good at and I would enjoy. I like being around real estate. I like the math of real estate,
Sure.
and I like the people in real estate too. Right? It's not just the spreadsheets. I like the people you interact with. So I
Nice.
started that business in 2007, and as it grew, naturally we had some clients that had some single family homes, and they also owned a small apartment building. So we learned how to do multifamily management, and then some of our clients would have a couple houses in a small commercial building, and we learned how to manage small commercial.
Sure. Yeah.
And then so we over as it grew, it ended up being like a 7 division company. We managed single family, small multifam, large multifam, commercial, HOA. We had a development arm, we had a maintenance arm. So
Actually, can I ask you about that real quick?
yeah,
Because that's really important. I mean, from my perspective, coaching folks,
yeah,
um, And also just for this podcast, try to extract sort of one principle or one framework that you've used, at least one, if you've got a
Yeah.
couple. But one of the things that I help, entrepreneurs with is understanding, like you talked about the divisions in your company, right?
Hmm.
And each of them has its own distinct like business model because you have a, distinct market, or audience that you're, marketing to, distinct needs when it comes to the service, right? And then a distinct like financial model. There's a certain amount of profit and, how that works, like the expenses and the revenue and the profit that are part of that division. And I just want to just point that out that it's that's a really good way to be able to really grow your business and control your business is understand how there's like distinct sub models within your larger business model and like
Yeah.
implemented it consciously into different divisions, right?
Yeah. And I would say, I would, if you're talking to young entrepreneurs and like new entrepreneurs, I would say the way I did it probably isn't the way I would advise most people to do it. What I mean
Okay.
is, I think it's better to try to be good at one thing, maybe two things, but it's very hard to be good at seven things, which
Yeah, sure.
we were doing. And we were doing it for the most part, but it's very hard.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think
Yep.
one of my weaknesses as a young entrepreneur is I never wanted to say no. If I met a client, I wanted to take on the challenge of managing their properties, right? In
Yep.
retrospect, it might have made more sense to just say, hey, I manage just single family homes. That's it. And built all of my systems and processes around that one product type, right?
Love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep,
We took on
absolutely.
the challenge of taking on these other clients, and we eventually learned how to grow, but they are different. So we learned pretty quickly the way you manage one single family house is not the same as how you manage something that has 40. And the way you manage one house is not the same way you would manage a 40 unit apartment building, right?
Yeah.
And the way you manage a 40 unit apartment building isn't the same way you manage a 200 unit apartment building. Like those are,
Or
they're,
a commercial, like, yeah, office space or something, whatever, something like that, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, different systems, processes, different marketing, biz dev technique, like everything's different, right? So, I mean, there are similarities, and that's why you get drawn into it. But then if you don't realize quickly that they're different, and you need to build out different teams, different processes, then you're not going to be better than your competition, right? And you'd be doing your clients a disservice if you're doing it kind of half-assed, I would say. And so yeah, so most successful people in my space that I know did focus on one thing or two things. They didn't do seven things like we did. Some of our peers thought we were crazy. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're right that we took on a lot, but that was what we wanted to do. And so we like the challenge of doing that. When I started my business, somebody encouraged me to write a business plan. And before you start the business, there's so many unknowns. The business, I encourage you to write one and then go back and look at it 5 years later and see how accurate it is. And I still have mine. It's in my drawer next to my desk. And it's real funny every now and then I'll go back and read it. Like some of the stuff was really spot on, but some of it was very, very wrong. And it's just funny to go back and see it. But even if it's wrong, going through that exercise, you start to uncover maybe gaps and holes, things that you weren't thinking about by
Yes,
just going through that
exactly.
process.
Right. Which is a
And
big part of, again, what I do too, is like blind spots. You don't realize, like, you said something really good before. You only know what you know, and you don't want to know. Most of the time, we don't know what we don't know.
right.
And it's until you've gone through that exercise of sort of covering the whole business, the different aspects. And it's like, I think a business plan should be like a living document that more like a strategic plan that you renew,
Sure.
and you learn each time. It's an iteration, right? So you learn, but
Yeah.
don't want to pause too long there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and another, like, I guess when you start a business, I had a business plan. I was young. I was reading books, and this is pre-podcast days. Obviously, now I probably would listen to a lot of podcasts in that space like yours. But um, after a few years of learning and growing and banging your head against the wall, you start to see things break down. With scale, some of your systems break down, and it was very, after I was probably in business maybe 3 to 5 years when I discovered the book called Traction, it's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating Systems. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so I just happened to go to a property management conference. They had a speaker that was talking about EOS and Traction, and it just, like, it was the right place, right time for us, from our business. And me and Tim, who has been working with me for 15 years, we were at the same presentation, and we looked at each other. I was like, yeah, this is what we need at this point, right? We needed a system, and there are a lot of systems out there. I'm not saying this
Yeah.
is the one that everyone should do, but it worked
Well,
for us.
just my mentor actually worked with Gino Wickman, and
Oh, really?
that was part of the inspiration for me too. I mean, I have my own sort of framework, although it's a bit of a departure from EOS, but the same sort of idea of like being able to like have the just a handful of main drivers in the business, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah,
And
absolutely.
systems like force some discipline, and they force you to not push things off, like strategic planning,
Yeah.
setting goals, but then talking about them every week, so you can't hide from them. Like you set a goal, I'm going to do this in the next 3 months, and then you can't just like sweep it under the rug because it's on that board, and we look at it every week and talk about it. And if you're either doing it and hitting that goal, or you're not, and you need to explain to people why you're not, right? Like, and so I'm a big fan of that system. We use it for all of our businesses now. So we've been using it for maybe 10 to 15 years. So we have 8 businesses, but each of those businesses runs their own level 10 meetings, has their own, has their own accountability chart, their own scorecard, all that stuff.
You've
And they're
really implemented the
yeah.
system and you're running it. Okay, so how did you go from the properties business to, you said 8 businesses? Like,
Yeah.
what was the
So
inspiration there?
along the way of running, what got me into real estate originally was like the investing side. Bought a house or two, rent, buy, renovate, flip, or buy, renovate, rent, and really loved the investment side. And so over the years, some of our clients were kind of growing developers, so I got to watch how they did it, and I got to ask a lot of questions, and we were part of the process, right? Like they come in, they're going to buy this building and renovate it, turn it into apartments. We got to come in early and help them build the pro forma. I saw how they're estimating construction costs. I saw what their debt looked like and their equity situation looked like. And so I got to learn from some really good developers. And so we started developing along the way as well. And so when 2022 came along, we had been in business now 15 years. We had about 160 employees. I had a mentor, or not a mentor group, a mastermind group that I was part of these 6 or 7 guys from across the country that were just like me, that ran property management businesses. And over the years, we were watching acquisitions and mergers take place. We were watching. We had acquired 11 small property management businesses along the way. My buddy in Birmingham had acquired a bunch. My buddy in Orlando acquired a few, and we were all trying to decide what do we want to be. Like, do we want to be a local place, a regional place, a national place? Like, what's our goal? I came to the realization that I liked running that business, but my buddy in Birmingham, he truly wanted to create a national property management business, and so what I decided to do was sell most of my business to him. I kept some stock in that business, so I'm still on the board. And I get to follow along and ride the upside, but he gets to take on that challenge of running a full-blown national business. So that company's called Evernest in Birmingham, Alabama. They're now in, I'm going to say, like 35 markets. Now I think they manage like something around like 15,000 units, something like that.
They're doing pretty well.
They're doing great. Yeah, they're doing great. And I still get to ride that, but he lives and breathes that business, and that's all he wants to do. And I've naturally kind of drawn to chase the shiny ball a little bit. I was over the years leaning more towards development and starting new things as opposed to running a large business. And I'm not saying I never want to run a large business again, but I do enjoy the small business. I love the starting, the growing, the launching. Really enjoy that part. So one of the things I love is doing real estate development. We like clustering deals together in transitional neighborhoods and kind of helping a whole neighborhood move forward. So like in Richmond, for years we've been developing in Scott's Addition, the Arts District, and a few other neighborhoods, Shaco and some others. We're now developing in the Forest Hill corridor, and we're doing a lot of development in Colonial Beach, Virginia. And so what we decided to do was sell a good chunk of our business to Matthew and Evernest in Birmingham, and we shrunk from 160 employees down to 20 employees. And our kind of new version of the Dodson companies is really focused on developing neighborhoods, right, and communities. So now we have a development arm called Dodson Development Group. We'll go into neighborhoods and buy and renovate properties. And there's times where we will, if we can't find the right commercial tenant for a particular location, we'll create that business, and we'll be the anchor tenant of a deal. So in Colonial Beach, we've got 2 restaurants, a wine and cheese shop, and a co-working space. And we've also developed townhouses, condos, everything. And this is all in the historic downtown, waterfront downtown in Colonial Beach. In Richmond, we have Graybo Sports Cards and Parlay, which is a sports bar right next door to the card shop. And we have a very small short-term rental management business. So that's kind of what we are now. And it may sound schizophrenic to someone looking outside looking in, and at times it feels schizophrenic inside the business. but it's what we want to do. It's what I want to do, you know. So it's an incredible challenge to start. We've started and launched most of these businesses in the last year and a half,
Hmm.
and so the Dodson companies acts as a back office for these small businesses. We do their
Okay.
HR, accounting, marketing, payroll here, so the operators of those businesses can focus on what they know, which is
Right.
running a
Yeah.
restaurant or
Okay.
running a baseball card shop. So it's again, it's not how I would tell everybody to do it, but it works for us, and we enjoy it quite a bit.
Well, so and again, let me just pause there for a second. Um, I do think, what makes a great entrepreneur. You said a couple of great things there along the way,
Mhm.
like that I think are really important for self-awareness as an entrepreneur. Usually, as an entrepreneur, you like doing crazy stuff, right? You're willing to take risk. You like to say yes. You like people generally,
Mhm.
and you like to have these relationships, and so there's this like expansion, like you're doing new stuff, you're trying all kinds of stuff. It's exciting, it's a wild ride, but you also have to contract, get
Mhm.
focused, really figure out what's working. Um, and I mean, it sounds like you've been able to sustain it, to be successful, to continually grow. Um, but not everyone finds himself in that situation of sort of continual growth. And you've really got to, have a real come to Jesus moment and
Mhm.
ask, like, what do we have to stop? What do we have
Mhm.
to simplify? What do we need to consolidate? Um, and that like sort of against your against the grain of your personality to just say yes to stuff, and you got to say no.
Sure.
You got to get
Yeah, like,
focused. Yeah,
an entrepreneur like is a unique individual, and I think they're always a little crazy. And I say that in a good way. I consider
yeah,
myself crazy, but you have
same
to have
here.
this incredible belief in yourself and optimism to even start, right? And then things get tough, and you have to have the perseverance to get through the tough times. And I think to me, that's the single most important quality of an entrepreneur is the perseverance and willingness to fight through it, not just give up at first. And in the same time, you can't be delusional, right? And sometimes optimism and belief and perseverance will take you to the brink of delusion, right?
Yeah,
And because it doesn't do anybody any good to start this sexy, glamorous business and then it fails in 3 months or 6 months. That doesn't do anybody good,
or in
right?
a year or
Don't write
two, right?
books.
Yeah,
They don't write books about those people, right?
right.
Um, but like there are a lot of businesses that failed month 3, month 6, month 9 because the person didn't stick it out. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't adjust and adapt and grow and fight, take risk, whatever. And so I have and some people in my life are gas pedals, and I've got some people in my life that are brake pedals. My mom is
Yeah, yeah.
my brake pedal. She's always telling me not to do stuff because she's scared, and I love her for that. And you got to have that too. And so I always like constantly try to be honest with myself and be honest with the people around. Like, is this working? Is it not? Can we win here or not? And if there's a chance to win, then let's fight through and let's win. But if there's not, let's be honest with ourselves, cut our losses, and adjust so we don't take the whole ship down with us. And so I think that's like if you can balance those two things, I think you should be okay.
Yeah, no. In fact, another principle, actually really a central foundational principle for what I do, and what I see constantly working with business owners, the both and, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
actually learned this from Aristotle. uh I was a geek in college and really loved like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. And
Smart guys.
what's that?
The smart guys. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. We're still reading them like 2,500 years later, so like
Right.
they had a few things to say worthwhile. But Aristotle says virtue is in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another way of saying it's the both and you just talked about it. Like you have two extremes, and if you just stick to one extreme, it's bad. So if you're always like pumping the brakes and you're afraid and you're not sure,
Yeah.
that's bad. If you're always just going after things, you're delusional, right?
Right.
It's only when you combine those two things together, not watering them down, but combining them, that you
Yeah.
get someone who's really capable to do some amazing stuff, right?
Sure.
So it's great that you have like the different voices, in your life, mentors and support,
Mm-hmm.
that help you to stay that, course in the middle, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah. So you got these different businesses going, and uh, actually, can you just say something about Graybos real quick? Because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So Grabo Sports Cards is a sports card business next door to my office here. It's run by my brother-in-law, who is the mascot, Gray. We
Okay.
call him Grabo. And then Gray's friend and guy who used to work with me named Ryan Fitz. So those guys run that business, but I'm very involved in it. I'm there, a couple days a week at least. It's a sports card business. We sell baseball, basketball, football cards, some Pokemon and Magic the Gathering type trading card game stuff, some memorabilia. But we sell cards in the shop. We also sell through a streaming service called Fanatics Live, or there's one called Whatnot, where you can sell. We have a studio set up, and the breaker sells break spots and opens the cards, and we ship the cards to the customer.
Cool.
It's a fun business, a great business. It's one I'm very passionate about. I just love being around sports, and so as a kid too. Like I always liked the idea of the stock market and like buying something based on your instincts and leans and kind of intuition. And so, some people that do that like to gamble, like to play poker. I used to play poker a lot. Some people like to sports bet. Some people like to buy stock. Some people invest in real estate. But you can invest in sports cards. Like if you think Joe Burrow is going to win 3 Super Bowls in his career, then maybe you want to buy Joe Burrow's big rookie cards. And as he has success, his card values go up. As he gets injured and misses the year, his card values go down. So it's a form of gambling. But I like that drew me back to the card business, because I was a big card collector as a kid. Got out of it during high school and college, and then when COVID came along, a lot of the asset prices started to soar because for several reasons. There was kind of funny money injected into the market. So like things like sneakers and crypto, they kind of went crazy. So did sports cards, but also a lot of people my age were going through their attics and garages because they were stuck at home during COVID and kind of fell back in love with cards, and maybe were like starting to do it with their kids, exposing their kids to it. So now kids are back into the hobby. So it's a great industry, great business, love it, and it's very exciting and fun. So we have it. We have Grabo Sports Cards on the right side, and we have Parlay Sports Bar on the other side. And so it's a really unique experience for a card collector to have a sports bar there. So we like to think it's like becoming like the epicenter of like sports fans in Richmond, Virginia. If you want to buy cards, if you want to watch sports, if you want to have a pizza and a beer and grab a pack of cards and rip it at the table, you can do that. We have live breaks going on almost around the clock, and you could be sitting there at lunch or dinner, and you can see the break going on the screen. You can walk over and interact with the breaker. It's kind of a fun interactive retail experience.
Wow, that's, I mean, very cool. Like a
Yeah.
whole experience too. That's part of it. That's like it's especially with the bar,
Sure.
and the restaurant. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. That's like all of our businesses I like, don't get me wrong, but they also serve a purpose, meaning like the restaurants in Colonial Beach, they're there because we were developing waterfront retail with condos above, and we needed something awesome on the water. That's a great experience for Colonial Beach goers. All these restaurants are great, but if somebody wanted to come along and buy them one day, I'd probably sell them. But the Grabos business is the one that I would run, even if it wasn't in one of our buildings. Like if it wasn't filling a hole in a building, that's one that I would certainly pour myself into for a while.
Awesome. So one thing I didn't really ask, earlier I was saying it sounds like you've sort of been successful and you've been able to build continuously, but I'm sure there's some tough moments. I mean, you said that's what like sort of the chief characteristic of an entrepreneur.
Sure.
So can you name like one or maybe two like really tough moments where you had to make some hard decisions, and what principles you used, or what ideas, or what you used to make the decisions that got you through it?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, there's a long list of difficulties and failures and things that didn't go like you thought they were going to go.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple. One example I think was we when we started Dotson Property Management a few years later, we started a maintenance company called Riverbend Property Services, and it was set up at first to service us and our clients. So instead of calling a plumber or electrician or a handyman from another company to fix something on our property, like, hey, why don't we create what we want and make that be service us, and they could also service other landlords and property managers and homeowners. And I tried for 3 or 4 years to really get that business to work, and I never got it profitable. And again, I think if that's the only business I had to run, I probably could have figured it out. But because I was running single fam, multifam, commercial, and Riverbend, I didn't have the time and energy to put the attention into it. And so that business never got profitable. And so we had to make the tough decision. What do we do? Right. And so with Riverbend specifically, what we did was we ended up basically just terminating the business, we took as much of like the labor as we could and just brought them in-house as labor for Dodson Property Management. So for example, if we had a handyman working at Riverbend, that handyman now worked for Dodson, and maybe not was not as much of a profit center, but we didn't have to lay off all those people. But we did have to trim like the general manager, the accountant, and the dispatcher. So there's three people that
They're
lost.
hard decisions. Like laying, like firing people is always a tough decision.
Oh, it's the worst thing. It's awful.
It's the worst.
But you have to learn to do it. You have to learn to do it.
Yep.
And I think so. Back to your question, what value system do we use to determine that? Right. So if it was losing a little bit of money and employing a lot of people and performing a service that was needed, I probably would have kept it for longer. But because it was losing more than a little, it was losing a lot. I think the value system for us has always been, well, we have to protect the company and the mothership because without it, nobody has a job, right? It's how I like to look at it. And so, you probably took ethics classes and whatever in college, and the old adage, I remember like an ethics teacher was like, if a plane's going down and 100 people are going to die, if they handed you a gun and said, you shoot this guy in the head, but the other 99 people live, would you do that, or would you let the whole plane go down? That's a tough question to answer, right? But the way I viewed it was, look, man, there's these three people are going to lose their job, and that stinks. Let's treat them fairly. Let's be honest. Let's give them good recommendations. Let's connect them to people so they can find a job elsewhere. But I got to protect everybody else's job, right? Not just at Riverbend, but at Dodson Property Management.
Well, and thankfully, like in that analogy, I mean, sort of from an emotional level, like when you shoot somebody in the head, you end their life, right? And it can feel like that when you fire somebody, that you've just ended their life. But the reality is often that actually is a catalyst for something much better in their lives. So just, that's how it feels, is that you're shooting somebody in the head. But, and I like the thinking of like, well, if you sacrifice sort of this or make some hard calls here, it'll save a greater good, or preserve a greater good. So
if I had more time, I probably wouldn't have used the shoot him in the head analogy. I probably
sure,
that's a little violent. I kind of regret that the gun. But anyways, I think you
got but that's, I mean, it's good. That's because I think that was good because it's raw, because that's usually from an emotional, like sort of subconscious level, that's what it feels like. It feels like shooting somebody. So
the first time you fire somebody, like I mean, that person cried, I cried, like it was a very emotional experience. And then but that person today, to your point, is in a better place for them. They have a better job. So like when someone's failing at a job, like, they're not happy either. They know they're failing. And so you're not doing them a service by letting them continue to fail. You should, honestly, first you should coach, mentor, make sure they're in the right seat on the bus. Is there another seat you can move them to where they'll thrive and whatever? But if there's not, absolutely. Every person we've ever fired is now today in a better place. They're happier. They have a better job that's better suited for them. They probably learned something from the experience. And so firing gets easy. You've got to have a system around it, just like we hire based on our core values. And we always say, you got to be two things here. You got to be a good culture fit, and you have to be good at your job. And that sounds simple enough. And so every quarter we give quarterly reviews. We tell people where they sit, like, hey, you're a good culture fit, you're good at your job, or you're not, and here's why. And we try to work through it. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a system around when you pull that trigger and fire someone, then eventually they're going to drag you down to the point where the damage will be worse than firing one person.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a hard decision. Was basically to end the Riverbend properties, or what was
services? Yeah,
service business.
Riverbend property services. Yeah,
property services. So then, all right. So we're coming up on time, and I said before, I'd love to make this like 3-hour long form, but for the sake of what we're doing, kind of want to wrap there. But what's in the future for you? What are you looking at now?
So for us, this year was a year about launching, and I think next year, 2025, is a year about executing. So we've bit off a lot, and now we got to chew before we bite off anything else. And so these 8 businesses, we're still learning how to execute, how to operate, how to get to profitability in some cases. And so for the next year, I think Dodson Development Group will still do some development deals next year. I doubt we'll launch any new businesses next year. We're going to really focus on the businesses that we have. And then I hope at this point next year, I'll be sitting down with you saying, hey, we've gone from 4 of our businesses being profitable to 7 or 8, right? And then we're ready to launch a few more. People always ask us, some of our businesses, will we replicate them in other markets? Will we do another Grey Bows and Parlay in Raleigh or Northern Virginia or somewhere else? And the answer is maybe. I'm just not focused on that right now. I'm very focused on getting these businesses operating as well as they can.
Yeah.
Um, as a small business grows, you start to outgrow certain people in certain seats, and you need a bigger infrastructure, more experienced infrastructure, but you can't quite afford them. They call it like no man's land is the term that's used a lot. And so we will, as we grow, we'll have to continue to scale up and get better in certain seats. We'll have to get better at accounting, HR, marketing, all those things have to get better. The business operators need to learn and grow and get better. Some of them will, right? Some of them will grow, and somebody who's now number two at a restaurant could be number one. Somebody who's at number one at a restaurant could oversee 4 restaurants. So that's the stuff we'll have to work through. So I say next year might sound boring, but we're gonna work really hard at executing. And then this time next year, like I said, I hope that we're telling you, hey, look, we're gonna open another something somewhere. But for now, our heads are down executing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, like you said earlier, not to give up. I mean, along the same lines, like willingness to grind.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got great ideas. Now it's got to be implemented. Now it's got to really like be, like for whatever reason, the image that comes to mind is like kneading the dough. Like you put all the ingredients together, like that's great, but you got to like knead it until it expands, right?
Right.
It's a weird analogy to use, but that's what came to mind. So
Sure.
you got to grind, right? And so that's this next year. How about longer term? Like, do you have kind of a vision, like painted a picture of what you would like to have accomplished at the end of your life, kind of thing?
Yeah. So I mean, in the business, I've got a lot of personal goals that'll probably bore you, but like the business goals, we do set 1, 3, and 10-year goals for each of the businesses, including like the mothership, the Dodson companies. So the Dodson companies right now, we think our special sauce is we have this unique ability to develop neighborhoods because A, we can develop real estate, and B, we can run a business, right? And you
Yeah.
put those two things together. If you follow what we're doing in Colonial Beach, Virginia, we really are transforming that little historic downtown on the waterfront. And we're like 3 or 4 years into that process, but it's probably like a 10-year process. We've been instrumental in. We're not the only person who's developed in Scott's Addition, but we're part of it. We're not the only person who's developed in the Arts District. We're not the only person developing on the Forest Hill Corridor, but what we're doing is a catalyst, and it's helping these neighborhoods grow and thrive. And so, what we think the future looks like is if we really knock it out of the park with Colonial Beach, and we prove that we can do all the things it takes to develop a neighborhood, including the real estate, the construction, the running the business, the political relationships, the relationships with other people in town, all of these things you have to manage and balance, sourcing the equity, sourcing the debt. Like these things take money, and you have to raise the money. If we're really good at that, then there may be a time where we go to the next neighborhood, the next little town, the next little riverfront town, and do it again. And maybe you do it at 2 or 3 or 4 places. But I think it's about, for the short term, is pouring more into these neighborhoods and helping them grow and thrive. And then down the road, if we really like that and we really want to do that again, it might be doing that Colonial Beach experiment in other markets. And with that, instead of 8 businesses, might be managing like 30 or 40 businesses then. And that's when you might have the seafood restaurant that's in Colonial Beach might also be in another riverfront town, or the Gravos that's in Richmond might also be in Raleigh and Atlanta and other markets. But that's what we see it as, maybe 30 to 40 businesses and a lot of real estate development along the way.
Yeah. So 30 to 40 businesses, really like scaling with excellence is, maybe a way to paraphrase it or put
Sure.
it.
We've got to get it right first before we duplicate it, for
That's
sure.
right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Duke, this is awesome. My goal with the podcast is at least to extract sort of like one really solid principle, right? That other folks who are that aren't quite as far along can use. But I think we got hit on like 4 or 5. So really good stuff. Good on you, and it was a real pleasure to get to know you a little bit and what you're doing. So that's a wrap. Is there any last words, any last thoughts?
Well, I'd just say for small, young entrepreneurs or just new entrepreneurs, you don't have to be young necessarily. Is the idea is great, but without perseverance and toughness and grit, if you don't think you can get through tough times, then don't start. But once you start, get ready for tough times and get ready to fight through it. And no one's going to feel sorry for you, so don't feel sorry for yourself. Just get up at 4 a.m. if that's what it takes, and get it. Keep getting up at 4 a.m. until you get it fixed, and then something else will break. Fix that. Something else will break. Fix that. Something else will break. Fix that. That's my advice to any kind of entrepreneur. And I think Elon Musk once said, somebody asked him, what would you tell a young entrepreneur that's not quite ready to launch, and how do you get them the courage to get over that hurdle? And he said, I wouldn't. He said, if you need that much of a pep talk to do it, then you may not be cut out for it. If you're sitting there thinking about it for 10 years and and you're afraid to take that leap, then that's fine. You're probably not cut out to be an entrepreneur, and that's fine. You don't have the risk tolerance. That's okay. Do something else.
Yeah.
And it will probably save that person a lot of heartache. If they don't have the risk tolerance to start, they probably don't have what it takes to see it through either. In my opinion, and I agree. I don't agree with everything Elon does, but I agree with that. So
Right.
but
Awesome.
no, I'm great to know that you're in Richmond. We'd love to catch up again. Feel free to, if you want to grab lunch one day at Parlay, we'd love to hang out. So come see me.
Fantastic. Yeah. So where can people find you? And well, who would you love to connect with, and where can they find you?
I would love to connect with investors who believe in what we're doing, believe in the chances that we take, and realize that what we're doing is a little different, a little crazy, but we do have the toughness to see it through. Folks that really like implementing, creating change in these neighborhoods and communities and want to be part of that, come find us. You can find all of our businesses on Instagram. We're on other platforms too. Our website, Dodson Companies, you can find us there as well.
Awesome. Okay. Instagram and, on the website, and yeah, just Google search.
I'm not hard to find. You can find me if
Right.
you need to.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Duke.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks, man.